Welcome everybody to our June call for pickleball this month. The little bit about me, I'm just the director of pickleball at Sugarloaf Country Club. So got the program started, got interested in pickleball in 2019, really, and it's just taken off from there. So kind of was lucky to be at the beginning of the wave, as we would like to call it. It's become a tsunami now. It was a wave. And the American Racket Sports Association, which was formerly the GPTA, and before that was the Atlanta Professional Tennis Association. So we're happy that these are going on. It's a great informational tool and a good interactive tool. So this is going to be more of an interactive call, as it has been for the first couple times. And this month, I gave Sean a couple of topics, and this month's about equipment. What's been happening in the pickleball world as far as improvement in the paddles, improvement in the balls, and a tremendous amount of growth and building of new pickleball facilities, especially indoor. There's indoor and outdoor, but I think I can think of 4 or 5 projects currently in the Atlanta area for new pickleball facilities, which is exciting. The one that we talked about last month with Chris Wolf is the one in Alpharetta, which is going to be a super high-end pickleball facility. I believe he said 18 indoor, and then phase number 2 would be maybe 6 or 8 outdoor. So that's exciting. And then there's a couple downtown that are being built, one out in Flowery Branch, um, because the need is there. And what's exciting about that from a tennis perspective is that we hopefully there'll be enough standalone pickleball courts that we won't still be taking away tennis courts to convert them into pickle. Because that's been a big battle, and tennis players, of which I am one, and I know Sean, you are as well, and Steve, you probably are as well. We don't want to see tennis go away, and we don't want to see courts disappear because once they go away, it's difficult for them to come back. And so, new standalone pickleball facilities are encouraging for both, I would say, for both sports. Exciting. Um, the one thing I did want to get into is the paddle technology has just changed dramatically. And within the 5 or 6 years that I've been really vested into pickleball, paddle technology is it just increased tremendously. And the power that's coming off and the spin. And the spin is allowing players to be much more aggressive from all different areas of the court. So we don't see the traditional dinking soft game like we did 6 or 7 years ago. It's full on, flat out going for it. And that's really kind of helped the tennis players who have transitioned into pickleball because they can play more tennis on the pickleball court, provided they have the correct technique and everything. But it's good for them because the spin and the grit on those paddles is tremendous. They used to be just fiberglass, and now they are all textured with various components. Um, in my research, I found over 700 paddle manufacturers. I don't know how that's going to continue to stay like it is. But I see that whittling down kind of like tennis did, where you have maybe 5 or 6. Steve, you have your hand up.
Thanks. In tennis, the ITF regulates equipment and they say what's legal and not. Even, the USTA, if you want to have an Alta facility, there's something that there used to be like 47 criteria. What direction is the court facing? How many foot candles do the lights provide at night? How far away is the fence from the baseline, etc. And what if you drop a tennis ball from a certain height, it has to rebound, I think, 3 feet or something like that. Who regulates pickleball equipment? You're talking about all this equipment now. It's more spin, more power. Who regulates it?
That is a great question. There are two regulating bodies. So they do test the paddles. And I think, let me get my notes here. There are over 4,000 approved USAPA pickleball paddles. So they go through a testing of the spin, the grit, the thickness, the power. They do similar to what tennis does. I know there's another one that the tour players have to adhere to. So, for instance, I've got a friend, Sean knows him well, Frank Salerno, and he designed his own pickleball paddle and meets all the USA, RSA, PA, all those. But when he went to play at the Atlanta Open, they used a different criteria, and his paddle was not on the approved list. So he had to borrow one of my paddles to play in the tournament. So there is regulation, Steve, and they do look at it. And matter of fact, the umpire will take everybody's paddle in the beginning and make sure it's not delaminated and make sure the grit is not overly textured. And they'll actually feel the paddle before they even start. They'll take them, they'll feel them, and then they also have a list of what's approved now to play with.
And is
Um,
that published anywhere? Because if I go on Amazon and I want to buy a cheap paddle, I don't know if it's coming from China. Is it approved or not? How do
right.
we find out if I'm playing with a legal paddle?
It should say USAPA approved. Um, and unless you're playing a pro tournament, any paddle that says USPA approved is good for, it's a legal paddle. Legal to play in rec play, legal to play in rec tournaments, non-professional sanctioned tournaments. I just played in one in Alabama this past weekend, the Senior Southern Championship, and they tested our paddles before we went out to play. But not the criteria that the pros have to go through. There's a fight there. There's a little bit of a fight between different organizations. So, um, it's a little bit of the Wild West still, as Sean and I had agreed upon it out there. I think once the game gets a little bit older, it'll get a little bit more stringent. What I can't believe is how many independent paddle manufacturers there are. In tennis, you guys correct me, are five or six manufacturers, maybe seven. Um, all the rest have disappeared. So I think that's going to happen eventually to pickleball. I don't know when. It just doesn't seem like it's ending because more people are inventing and coming up with more paddles.
And paddles are so cheap, remember tennis rackets are 250, $300, and then you've got the
Yeah.
stringing and so that and then Kunan Low in China made I think for Prince and Wilson and Yannick, so he was making a lot of them. But yeah, it in tennis it was a little different. You can go on Amazon and buy. I just got two pickleball paddles just for starter. If somebody want to play, two paddles, four balls, and a bag for $15. And then I had my credit card shopping points, so I got it delivered to my house for like $2.15.
Wow.
Well,
That's
Jim, if you
why.
don't mind, if I take this one, Steve, you
Yeah.
basically, so the tennis rackets that Walmart sells, the plastic ones with Maria Sharapova on them, that you would never hand to any of your tennis clients, the aluminum full size adult rackets that Walmart sells. That's
Mhm.
basically the equivalent of what you just bought.
Yeah, because I
So,
did not use this for tournament play. But on the other hand,
right.
I play A-level Alta with a 45-year-old warped, cracked Jack Kramer autograph that hasn't been restrung in 40 years, and I win. And people get so upset, you know.
I love it. I love it. No, the a quality paddle now, Steve, I would say is between 150 and $300. I don't think it's crazy to see a $350 pickleball paddle to me. Anyway, I think that's outlandish, but I think anywhere in the 150 to $200 range, you can get a super high quality paddle. So they have come up in price. Some of it may be marketing. You know, technology, you can only do so much to a pickleball paddle, I think. Tennis, there's so much more variables as far as technology goes. You know, you got a swing weight and a flex weight and all that. There's none of that in pickleball. There is a little bit of a flex. I saw a machine that tests all that, but I don't know. I think a lot of that's just marketing,
Yeah, I
personally.
think where pickleball can pick up from tennis is cosmetics. For many years, women especially were stringing their rackets with colored strings to match their outfits, or buying grips to match their outfits, or color of a racket. The kids were buying rackets because Agassi was playing or Andy Roddick was playing with it.
Sure.
Consumers got upset because they bought the latest Twaron fiber nanotech Kevlar rackets, and then the next year was a new model, and they were like, "Well, wait a second, this is last." And the racket companies were coming out with new models like every 6 months, trying to say this racket's better. But if you buy the best tennis racket today, is it really going to be obsolete in 3 or 4 years? Are these new rackets that and technologies that they're coming out with going to obsolete this fabulous racket you bought today? And so with paddles, I wonder has anyone done any surveys to find out how much is cosmetics driving this? If they're all good APA approved, then do the men want really cool, dark colors, and the women want uh, whatever millennials may want, sunrises and palm trees and stuff?
You know, Steve, you bring up a good point because you can customize a paddle. We could get Sugarloaf pickleball paddles if we get the logo to the right manufacturer. Um, so, yeah, there's a lot of
Go
real
Tennis can
estate.
provide that, Jim, by the way. Anybody out
Yes.
there wants pickleball paddles personalized? We do have that service. We can get you your own signature series if you want.
Yeah,
They're not necessarily high end, but they're not the Walmart version either.
I could do the Jimbo. I could do a Jimbo pickleball
Jimbo
paddle.
pickleball paddle. That's coming. Hang on. I'm writing that down. We're doing
I
that.
think colleges and high school, when pickleball gets there, will do that.
Uh,
There you go. Every high school can have their
yeah.
own. Now, again, those high school kids, just like tennis, they're still going to want their Selkirk. They're still going to want the Yola. They're going to want what the famous pickleball players are playing with. But yeah, that would be fun because hey, you know what? If you don't have your own paddle, then here, this is your, Steve's local high school pickleball paddle with our logo on it. Yeah, we can make that happen.
So Steve, just so you know, I've been doing this just 6 years now. I mean, got certified in 2019. Feels like I've been in pickleball forever, but because I've gotten down so deep into it. Um, I remember watching pro tournaments where the number one doubles team in the world um, would split $1,500. That's what they would win. And now the money is in the millions. Not for tournament money, but just for sponsorships and for signed with a Yola paddle or Fila clothes or whatever. Those pro athletes are now making in the millions. So I imagine as more money gets dumped in, we'll see differences with the paddles. Um, it is interesting. It's fun to be at the beginning of the growth of this explosive sport. And I kind of was at the beginning of tennis when tennis boom happened, which was in the late 60s, early 70s. I started playing in 1969. So I remember waiting for tennis courts. Just you had to wait an hour, 2 hours to get on a court. That's how popular it was. And now pickleball has done the same thing. So kind of lucky to be at both ends. And yes, Steve, I still have my wooden rackets as well. Um, Jack Kramer is one, and I have a Dunlop Max Fly Fort, I think somewhere up in my attic, I believe.
That was the labor, a real heavy racket. And then we all had Tad Davis.
Oh yeah,
I've
Tad
got my
Davis.
T2000 strung and ready to go upstairs. So I'm
Yeah.
in.
I had a Bancroft Ashway I played with in high school, my junior senior year. It was beautiful, white with red. Oh, I love my racket.
Well, and Jim, I'd be interested at some point. We'll get together with Steve, and we got to do some of these things on court where we share the equipment and we talk about the changes and how different it is. I remember the first time because I've got a set of paddles that I bought in 2020 and said, "Hey, this is going to be a thing." And I did the same thing as Steve did. I'm like, "How much can I get for as little as possible and find out what's going on?" And they sent me four wooden paddles. The covers were the nicest thing that came with the paddles and some pickleball. I still have them and we let our, 3-year-old play with them, but I can go hit with some of these things. And then I go hit with the nice Pro Drive paddle or, oh yeah, there you go.
This is a wooden pickleball paddle right here.
Uh-huh. But you wouldn't dare actually try to play with it. I mean, it just doesn't feel right.
It feels like a log.
There you
I
go.
mean, yours
Nice.
yours is graphite, Steve. I mean, it's at least it's graphite, right?
You
Well, one thing that pickleball manufacturers can learn from tennis manufacturers is advisory staff how to choose your pros. And you need to say, look, when you're teaching lessons, you need to bring 4 or 5 paddles out on the court based on whether you have a teenager, an adult male, an adult female, a senior, and then you need to put these in their hand. And you're not necessarily trying to sell them. One thing you can do is say, hey, I've got these new paddles that are aimed for women or aimed for seniors. Would you hit and tell me what you think? Or I see that you haven't, been getting much spin. Let me try this. So, advisory staffs at one point were just giving rackets and shoes and clothing to pros to wear and hit with because people would buy them. And then they started saying, no, unless you can show us that you're driving retail sales. You either have to have a pro shop on site or we're giving you coupons and you send them to this local retailer. If you're not selling rackets and shoes and clothing for us, why are we giving you all this stuff? So we need to teach pickleball and padel pros. They need to bring paddles out in the court and put them in the customer's hands and say, I think this would be good for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I am on a head advisory staff pickleball professional, so they do have that. And I do get free equipment. And so I do bring multiple paddles out for my members to use. Um, I'm not sure if Wilson was doing that as well for advisory staff, but I changed over because we did something different in our pro shop. So I have to drive some sales, like you mentioned, Steve. I've been around so long that in the beginning we got nothing because all the money went to the touring pros and we were selling all the rackets. And I said, and finally, I think it was Wilson finally said, you know what? We're going to give the guys on the ground, the grassroots guys that are growing the game, free equipment because that's where we're really seeing people buying stuff. It's not because, a certain player is playing with a certain racket. So, and then it's gone back the other way again. So it goes back and forth. Um, I didn't
Well,
have a pro shop at first, so I had to when I was at Riverside Club in Roswell, no, Sandy Springs, I needed to send them to a certain pro shop so that I could justify having the free equipment.
yeah, and Wilson did some research in the 1980s and they asked people, why do you buy rackets? Is it advertising? Is it the pros? Is it? And consistently it was teaching pros. And so, do you remember the Wilson profile?
Hmm.
Within 6 months of its launch, that was the number one rack in the country. They spent no money on print advertising, no money on television advertising. They did no advertising, and it became the number one selling racket in the country because they gave it to teaching pros.
Yep.
The
Yep.
teaching brought it out into the court, and people were blown away. And they overtook Prince for the first time because remember, Prince was the first oversized racket, so everybody was playing with Prince. And then when they came out with the profile, they didn't spend a dime on advertising, and it became the number one racket in the country through teaching pros.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And that's all as teaching pros, we kept saying that to the reps. We're the ones that are selling all your rackets, not the guys on TV.
Well, and
And so
equipment, Jim, as well, from an equipment standpoint, beyond just rackets and paddles, there's a reason that the Wilson guys and the head guys, I say that the coaches are decked out. They say, I've got my head shoes and I got my head shorts and my head
Mhm.
underwear. I talked to Lou. He's like, I'd be wearing head underwear if they made it.
Lou.
And I don't know if it's just because they love head bracket sports specifically, or it's because that's where their free stuff comes from. But to Steve's point, if we, the coach types, are out there repping these things, it's one thing to show them not only am I a client, but not only do I sell them, I'm also a client, right? To where we can say, okay, no, I actually wear these shoes, or this is the paddle. Because I remember back in the day, back when I was at TPC, Jim, I had two different rackets. I would have the racket that I would teach with, but the racket that I would play with, because I was convinced by my head pro that no one is going to play. You're not going to sell the member, the housewife, so to speak, a Wilson 93 blade. Like that's might be what you play your tennis matches with, but that is not what you're going to teach with, because you're going to be out there and you're going to teach with a popular racket that you can just hand to a client and say, you know what, try this. Or to Steve's other point, have a stack of rackets with you.
Oh yeah.
You can say, you know what, why don't you give this a shot? Doesn't mean I'm trying to force you to buy anything, but see how it feels. And one of the things we do on the Go Tennis side is we give sponsored coaches the ability to use more than one brand. So if it isn't just I'm only stuck with Wilson and promoting Wilson or Head or whoever it is, if I like the Babolat shoes, I'm going to wear those and I'm going to promote those. But if somebody else says, I don't like Babolat at all, I can also say, well, you know what? My second favorite pair happens to be Head, or I really like this other thing as well. And I'm not bound by that single brand. But back to Jim, your point of the change in pickleball specific equipment. Steve's got a wealth of knowledge on how the equipment has changed from a tennis perspective. Do you think, Jim, that we'll see a similar adjustment, or are the paddle versus the racket, they're just such different things that they're not going to evolve in similar patterns?
I see the shoe has done that. There's definitely three or four manufacturers that just make pickleball shoes. And they do feel different. They do react differently. Um, I know Head has done a great job with their new pickleball shoe. I absolutely love that shoe. But there are other shoes. The Tyrol shoe is just a specific pickleball shoe. There's a few others that have come out. And the difference is that it has much different cushioning where you sit down lower into the shoe. It has a different arch support, definitely lateral support. Tennis shoes definitely do that as well. Um, but they also have vents on the bottom. So they actually vent your foot as far as friction goes because you're such quick movement on the pickleball court with your feet that it's much more heat is generated, and so they actually will vent. They have air pockets, air holes underneath, which be careful because when it's wet and you're walking in a puddle, all of a sudden water comes up into your shoe, and that's happened to me a couple times where I was like, oh no, my sock is soaked. Um, but I absolutely love those shoes for that reason. Paddles, I don't know. I don't know how much more they can push the boundaries. I think with rackets, there's more, you've got different lengths. Pickleball, there are different lengths as well, but I think there's the head size can vary so much more with tennis. The balance, the swing weight, the materials. Um,
Yeah,
I think more technology goes into a tennis racket.
I think they can also borrow from the tennis industry. For example, um, remember when tennis pros in the 80s were putting lead tape around the head of a racket?
Oh yeah.
They didn't know why. And then a physicist figured out when you add weight to the head of a racket, you increase the sweet spot. So then Wilson came out with the hammer. And they said, instead of
Oh
making
yeah.
the racket head heavier by adding weight, we're going to take weight out of the handle. And so now the head is heavier. You have a bigger sweet spot, but
Yep.
overall the racket is lighter. And they got a letter from a guy in New Jersey who said, that's my patent. And he made a lot of money off of that. But what,
Really?
yeah, he also had I think it might have been the same guy who had the patent for the profile. I think it originally was shopped to head. They made a few, the big thick racket. They made a few thousand and said, no, we believe the future is thin. Then they gave it to Prince and they said, no, we're not doing it. And then Jim Baugh saw it, and Baugh knew that people wanted power and control, or power and control. But he said, okay, the head heavy will give us the control, and the power will come from the thick middle. But what we also have to remember is you don't hit a tennis ball with the racket, you hit it with the strings. And that's where a lot of the technology change was. When he was retiring, Pete Sampras said, if I had the strings that Andy Roddick is using, I'd have won a half a dozen more Grand
Yep.
Slams. The Kevlar and crosses or in the poly mains or whatever they got. I mean, so you also have that phenomenon that you can still continue to mess around with the strings of a tennis racket. But then there's also a move to slow down the game because tennis is just so boom, boom, boom. It's 5 hours of 3 point, strokes. When you see these long rallies, that's great, but the average U.S. Open, I think, is it's 4 or 5 strokes
Yeah,
per point.
absolutely. And rec plays even less because of errors. But you're right. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but I have my paddle and I do tape also. Some of it's lead, some of it's not. So they've already started putting more lead in different spots on the pickleball paddle to supposedly enlarge the sweet spot as far as that goes. I did see a lady, Steve, playing with the hammer 2 weeks ago. And I went up to her and I said, man, that thing, she goes, I'm never giving up this racket. I can remember playing Woody Hoblitzer and Peter Howell in my Alta match at Norfolk Tennis Center, and they came out with those hammers that were about 25 inches thick and just pounded the tar out of the ball. I can't remember who I was playing with. I don't think I was playing with Larry Schnall. I was playing with another pro. We got pasted. I said, "What are you guys using? What are those things?" And
Clearly, it's the technology.
oh my gosh, I mean, because Woody and Peter couldn't hit the ball out of a paper bag that hard. These guys were blasting the ball past us. So I was like, "What are you doing?"
Well, a little bit of history of tennis rackets. Howard Head took a head tennis racket and he cut the top off and he turned it sideways. And that was the beginning of the big.
Mhm.
He went over to Prince and they did the big Prince racket. Well, Prince got a patent on that for 15 years. So when you saw all of the Wilson large rackets, oversized rackets, and you saw the head oversized rackets and other brands, they had to pay Wilson or Prince a royalty.
Yep.
Every oversized racket sold, they had to pay Prince, and they were funding Prince for 15 years. And when Prince lost that royalty, then that's when Wilson took over with the profile, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
But I'm sure that all of those patents have already been applied to pickleball in terms of the size of the head and the weight in the handle. And remember with a tennis racket, the difference between the old wood rackets and the new one is Vic Braden fired from a tennis ball machine. He's fired balls at a Wilson profile, a head Genesis, and a Prince Thunderstick, and he threw in an old Jack Kramer autograph wood. The single fastest rebound came off the Jack Kramer. And he said, I think it's because it hit the true center of percussion. When you hit the true center of percussion on any paddle or racket, the ball will come back. It's when you hit off center with the newer rackets and the better technology in the paddles, it doesn't deform. So you have a more stable platform. And so that's one thing that a higher tech paddle will do for players that a cheap paddle might not.
Yeah, you're totally right on it. The more expensive paddles say that they've expanded the sweet spot out wider and bigger. Um, I hope that I keep hitting it in the center. That's what I keep trying to do. Uh,
That's the goal.
yes, we do have, Steve, we do have these trainers. We use them, which is just the size of the sweet spot of what it used to be on a wooden racket. And we use those with our kids for tennis. And I tell you, when you get that in your hand and they say, go ahead, let's rally, and I'm hitting with Mike Robertson or something, man, I am focused because I'm afraid I'm going to whiff the ball. Yeah, that thing is not very big. It is a teeny little round school round knob there. And surprisingly, you if you do concentrate, you can hit it right in the center because I didn't miss any, but it's intimidating when you take that big racket away and you go back to a very, very small sweet spot hitting area.
Well, when you are a baseball batter and you're on deck, you put a heavy weight. It's called a donut on the back, and
Right.
it's harder to swing. You take the donut off, you go to the plate, your central nervous system is set to resist that donut, and it uses a denser muscle pack. So that's why they swing faster for 6 or 8 swings. So now, if you practice with a wooden racket or a heavier pickleball paddle, when you pick up the lighter one, you are now going to have a faster stroke. And so when you practice with an old wooden racket, you do have to you can't slap with the wrist, you can't hit off the back. You have to hit every stroke perfectly. And then when you get back with the other racket and you're out to match, you're used to stepping in, watching the ball, following through. And I would say if you put a donut on your pickleball paddle and practice with that a little bit, and then you go out, it's called you don't change your technical stereotype, you change the dynamic stereotype. Same grip, same backswing, same follow through, but now your muscles are just moving faster. And that might be a way to train with pickleball equipment for competitive players is to put a donut or a smaller head or something that you practice with. And then when you go to the regulation equipment, you're going to be much faster without changing any mechanics.
I I think I saw something, I didn't really look at it too closely in the pickleball magazine that they do have trainers now, like you're mentioning, that are heavier to swing through so that when you get with your pickleball paddle, like you said, it just feels that much easier to swing through the ball. Um, but yeah, I think with the technology that has helped, there's two things that have sped the game up. One is the tennis players that are playing pickleball, and the other, and younger athletes, much younger. And the other is the technology. Definitely has increased the power. And there's talk on the tour that they want to dial that back a little bit. Um, but players are resistant to that because it's so exciting to be able to hit the ball that hard. You know.
Yep. All right. So, Jim, what else you got? We're coming toward the end. I know you wanted to cover some certain things, but I know
Yeah.
we covered most of it, and I'd
Yeah.
go to you to say what's left on your list to cover.
Oh, well, that was basically it. It was the difference in the balls. The other thing I would say is the ball. There are new balls that are out there, and the only criteria that pickleball has is you can have a maximum amount of holes, which is 40. Um, and then from there you can scale back. So Wilson started off what was called a true 32, where they had 32 holes in the ball that were lined up evenly so that supposedly the ball flight, and it did, the ball flight would be truer and go straight versus resistance, air resistance on some of the sides of the ball, the balls. Um, but the players were pickleball players are very weird about their ball. Some people only play with a Franklin X, some people only play with this ball. And what's happening on the tour is those ball manufacturers are paying millions of dollars. And so they're having to play with balls, pro players that they don't really like. Um, I know that Lifetime has its own pickleball now. Lifetime Fitness has gotten so involved in pickleball and converting many of their facilities that they have their own ball. And anytime a tournament's held at a Lifetime Fitness, it's in the contract with the tour, the pro tour, that they have to use that Lifetime ball. So in Atlanta was, I think, the kickoff of that Lifetime ball. And I heard through some of my sources, one of which just horrendous. The players were about to revolt, but they had to play with it. I mean, that was part of the contract. And I guess they got adjusted to it. Many of them didn't say anything about it towards the end, but there was an adjustment period. So the ball, too, is something that's not as consistent, I don't think, as tennis, where whether it's a Wilson, a Penn, a Slazenger, a Dunlop ball, it has to meet certain specs. I know the balls do as well, but there's more, I think, a bigger difference because of the way they make. Some balls are made in two halves and put together. Some are made solely from one. That was the True 32. It had no seam. So it was a whole different uh, technology to the ball. And because of that, it had a different feel. It had a thicker feel. And a lot of pickleball players didn't like that. So unfortunately, I think Wilson really did a great job with creating a new advanced pickleball. But it didn't, I think they've stopped making the ball. It didn't sell.
Well, another thing is generations grow up with different equipment, so that's why it was hard for the older folks to go with the thicker rackets and then the et cetera. If they're going to change the sound of a pickleball, they better do it quick because once you have multimillionaire, top celebrity pros, they're going to fight the silent ball even if there's no difference in playability, it's just going to freak them out. So you don't want to wait a generation, with all these lawsuits that cities are bringing or people are bringing against cities. Do you foresee a silent ball soon?
That's a great question. I have played with what's called a quiet paddle, and I was very reluctant. There's one called the Owl, which is not a good paddle at all. The cover is felt, so you can't put any spin on it. That was the one that McEnroe was endorsing, I think. But
Do you
the
have one of
quiet
those, Jim?
paddle,
Do you still have it?
no, I don't. I
No. I've
don't.
been trying to find someone who has one. I want to try the owl because I've
Yeah,
tried the is it librarian ball? It's basically
yes,
just a foam ball. I love it, but pickleball players aren't going to like it because
no.
it's not plastic.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah. The one I play with is called the quiet paddle, and it's not totally silent, but it definitely takes the decibels down. And we're going to have it at our tournament, our pro-am, as a couple of giveaways. And the
Nice.
guy that designed it is a material scientist in Florida, and he actually does a lot of the stuff for NASA. So he made a paddle, and I played with all of them, and they played really, really well. I was shocked. They weren't cheap, but they played excellent and tremendous spin and everything. There's just certain things he's done to make them quieter, and especially at that high decibel level. So it does give some decibel, but it's much more tolerant, I think. Hopefully that will help. Um, and the ball, Sean, I don't know how they're going to get away from that actual ball. I think
They don't
that
have to. It's fine. I mean, your
yeah,
neighborhoods are going to complain, but as long as the lights turn off at 10 o'clock,
yeah.
everybody's fine. I'm loud when I play tennis, yelling and screaming, having a good time. And as long as the lights go off in my neighborhood at 10 o'clock, I'm okay with it. But to say you've got to make sure you play a quieter sport,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the complaint.
To Steve's point though, there are cities that have outlawed pickleball at the
Oh, yeah.
parks and recreation. So that's what's good about all these new facilities, Steve, that are getting built. And I think pickleball is trying to catch up the construction part of it, trying to catch up to the demand. I don't know if they ever will. Kind of like tennis in the beginning, when the boom happened, you had to wait forever to get a court, and then they quickly went into building as many courts as they could. And that's why I want to see more pickleball facilities built so we can still maintain our tennis and we can still have those tennis courts for tennis players as well. Because I think both sports can coexist and they should. It's getting people active. It's a lifetime sport. It's a fun social sport. Both are fantastic for you mentally and physically. So want to keep them both going.